I hadn't even let go of my suitcase handle when a crisp $100 bill slapped against my cheek. Then a second one fluttered down. My sister screamed across the marble lobby, demanding I get out of her luxury hotel. The guests stared at me with pity, completely unaware that I held the power to seize this entire property in exactly 24 hours. My family was unknowingly setting the stage for their own public execution. My name is Melody Dunn. I am 32 years old, and for the last 10 years, I have been a ghost to the people who share my DNA. The tires of the rental car crunched over the gravel as I entered the town limits of Silver Rock. It was a place that smelled of pine needles, old money, and the kind of desperate pretension that only the fading upper class could maintain. I had not breathed this air since I was 22. The night I was thrown out into the rain with nothing but a torn suitcase and a heart that had been shattered into enough pieces to pave the driveway. My phone buzzed against the denim of my thigh. I pulled it out, half expecting a welcome message from the automated local tourism board. Instead, the screen lit up with a name I had not seen in a decade. Charles. The message was brief, brutal, and entirely predictable. Do not step foot in this hotel. You are not welcome. We have security on alert. I stared at the screen, and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of amusement, but the sharp, involuntary reflex of a predator spotting a limp in its prey. Charles Dunn, my father, thought he was banning a beggar from his castle. He thought he was protecting his precious anniversary gala from a daughter who had failed to launch. He had absolutely no idea that I was the one holding the mortgage. He did not know that Melody Dunn, the girl he exiled for being unambitious and soft, was now a co-founder of Northbridge Vale. He did not know that my firm specialized in distressed assets and high-risk corporate debt, and most importantly, he did not know that Northbridge Vale had quietly acquired the majority of the Opaline Summit Hotel's bond debt 6 months ago. Technically, I owned the chandeliers he was standing under. I owned the marble floors he walked on. And if the audit I had scheduled for tomorrow morning went the way I expected it to, I would own the shirt on his back by sunrise. "We are here, miss," the driver said, pulling up to the curb. I looked up at the Opaline Summit. It was a monstrosity of glass and stone, perched on the edge of the cliff, like a crown jewel that was slowly sliding into the sea. It looked majestic to the untrained eye, but I saw the cracks. I saw the deferred maintenance in the landscaping. I saw the desperate need for capital injection. "Keep the change," I told the driver, handing him a $20 bill. I stepped out onto the pavement. The wind bit at my face, but I did not zip up my jacket. I had dressed for this moment with surgical precision. I was wearing faded jeans that were frayed at the hems, a gray hoodie that looked like it had been washed 100 times, and scuffed canvas sneakers. No jewelry, no makeup. My hair was pulled back in a messy, loose bun. To the world, I looked like a woman who had hit rock bottom. I looked like I was coming home to beg for scraps. That was exactly what I wanted them to see. I needed them to feel safe in their arrogance. I needed them to look at me and see a failure, because people are careless when they think they are superior. If I had walked in wearing my usual tailored Italian suit with my Patek Philippe watch and a team of lawyers flanking me, their guard would have gone up. They would have hidden the books. They would have played the victim. But nobody fears the poor relation. They just despise them. And hatred makes people sloppy. I walked toward the revolving doors. The doorman, a man I did not recognize, looked me up and down with a sneer that was barely concealed behind his uniform. He did not move to help me with my bag. I pushed the heavy glass door myself, the friction of the rubber seal humming against the floor. The lobby hit me with a wave of aggressively perfumed air, white lilies and expensive floor wax, trying to mask the scent of stagnation. It was exactly as I remembered it, yet smaller. The grand staircase seemed less imposing, the ceilings less infinite. And there it was. Hanging across the mezzanine level was a massive banner, silk and velvet, printed with gold lettering that probably cost more than my first year of college tuition. Happy 35th anniversary. Charles and Vivian Dunn. 35 years. 35 years of lies, emotional manipulation, and financial gymnastics. My stomach tightened. A physical reaction to the names, but I breathed through it. I was not here as their daughter. I was here as a creditor. I moved to the side of the lobby, near a large potted fern, and pretended to fiddle with my phone. In reality, I was conducting a site inspection. I watched the front desk. There were 3 receptionists, but only one was typing. The other 2 were whispering, their posture slack. That meant low occupancy. If the hotel was fully booked for the gala as they claimed in their press release, the phones should have been ringing off the hook. They were silent. I watched the concierge interaction with a guest. The guest looked frustrated, gesturing to a bill. The concierge looked apologetic but helpless. Cash flow problems? Were they cutting corners on service to pay for the champagne tower tonight? I tapped the contact for Maya, my internal counsel at Northbridge Vale. She picked up on the first ring. Melody, Maya's voice was crisp, professional, a grounding anchor in the storm of memories. Are you inside? I am in the lobby, I said, keeping my voice low, blending into the ambient noise of the hotel. It is worse than the report suggested. Maya, the occupancy rate is visibly inflated. I am counting maybe 10 guests moving through the main artery in the last 15 minutes. For a Friday afternoon during peak season with a gala event, the numbers do not add up. We have the updated ledger, Maya said. They missed the covenant requirement on the liquidity ratio 3 days ago. We did not flag it immediately because you wanted to do this in person. But legally, you can trigger the clause. The default clause, I said, savoring the words. Yes, Clause 14B. If they cannot prove solvent capital reserves of $2 million by midnight tonight, the ownership reverts to the bondholders. That is you. Melody, you can seize the asset. And the proof of funds? I asked. They sent a document this morning, Maya replied, her tone shifting to skepticism. It is a screenshot of a holding account in the Caymans. It looks creative. We are running a verification now, but if it is fake, that is fraud. Not just bankruptcy, but criminal fraud. I looked up at the banner again. Charles and Vivian. They were not just bad parents. They were bad business people. They were throwing a party on the deck of the Titanic while drilling holes in the hull. Let them have their party. Maya, I whispered. Let them cut the cake. I want the transfer of ownership papers ready to be served at 12:01. You are sure you want to do this face to face? Maya asked, softness entering her voice. She knew the history. She knew about the scars I carried that did not show up on an X-ray. I am sure, I said. Prepare the filing. I will call you if the situation escalates. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I took a deep breath and stepped away from the safety of the wall. I walked deeper into the lobby, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished marble. This was the same marble floor where I had stood 10 years ago. The memory hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I could almost see the ghost of my 22-year-old self standing near the fountain. I had been crying, my mascara running down my face, clutching an acceptance letter to an art program that my father had ripped into pieces. You are a parasite. Melody. His voice echoed in my head, loud and clear across the decade. You do not contribute to this legacy. You just take, if you want to paint, go paint in the gutter where you belong. Get out of my house. Get out of my hotel. My mother had stood there, sipping her martini, watching me beg. She hadn't said a word. She had just signaled the security guard to open the door. I remembered the shame, the burning, hot shame of being unwanted by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. I remembered dragging that broken suitcase out into the dark, feeling like the world had ended. I had only $40 in my pocket and nowhere to go. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now. They were the hands of a woman who had built a portfolio worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They were the hands of a woman who had learned that legacy was not something you inherited. It was something you built from the ashes of the bridges you burned. A bellboy brushed past me with a luggage cart, nearly knocking me over. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look at me. To him, I was invisible. I was an obstruction. Perfect. I adjusted my hoodie, pulling it tighter around my shoulders. I could feel the weight of the credit card in my back pocket. The black titanium card that had no spending limit. I could buy this entire building, tear it down, and turn it into a parking lot if I wanted to. But that was too easy. Destruction was simple. Justice was complicated. I wanted them to look me in the eye. I wanted them to realize that the parasite had returned to become the host. I walked toward the reception desk, my eyes locked on the office door behind it. The general manager's office. That was where the real secrets were kept. That was where the truth lived. I stopped in the center of the lobby, right under the grand chandelier. I let the opulence press down on me. I let the memory of my father's screaming voice fill my ears one last time, letting it fuel the cold fire in my gut. 10 years ago, I walked out of these doors broken, believing I was worthless because they told me I was. Today, I stood on their marble floor, knowing exactly what I was worth. This time, I am not asking for a place. I am here to decide who has to leave. I approached the reception desk, keeping my head low. The receptionist was a young woman with a tight ponytail and eyes that flicked over my frayed hoodie with practiced disdain. She did not greet me. She simply waited, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as if touching it for someone like me was a chore. "Checking in," I said, sliding a credit card across the polished granite. Reservation for M. Vane. It was an alias, of course, Vane, as in vanity, a private joke I was keeping to myself. The receptionist picked up the card, frowning at the black metal. She typed the name into her system, her acrylic nails clicking a rhythm of annoyance. I watched the screen reflected in her glasses. I saw the moment she realized the room booked was the presidential suite, costing $5,000 a night. Her eyebrows shot up, disappearing into her hairline. I apologize, Ms. Vane," she stammered, her entire demeanor shifting from hostility to servitude in a nanosecond. "I did not realize you were a VIP guest. We have the suite prepared, if you need assistance with your luggage." "I can handle it," I said, cutting her off. I reached for the keycard, but before my fingers could graze the plastic, a shrill, piercing laugh shattered the ambient quiet of the lobby. I froze. I knew that laugh. It was the sound of my childhood nightmares, the soundtrack to every birthday party I was never invited to. "Oh my God, you guys! Look who crawled out of the gutter!" I turned slowly. Ava Dunn was standing near the entrance, a vision in crimson silk. She was holding her phone up, the ring light attached to the case blindingly bright. She was live streaming. Of course she was. Ava lived her life through a filter, performing for an audience of strangers because she had no actual personality to offer the real world. She marched toward me, the phone steady in her hand, capturing every frame of my disheveled appearance. Behind her, my parents, Charles and Vivian, stood like statues carved from ice and arrogance, and next to Ava was Logan Pierce, her husband, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than most people made in a year. Is that really her?" Ava shrieked, addressing her followers but staring right at me. "It is! Everyone, look! It is the prodigal failure. Melody, wave to the camera. Tell my 50,000 followers what it is like to be the family charity case." I did not wave. I stood my ground, my hands loose at my sides. "Hello, Ava." "Don't speak to me," she snapped, dropping the fake influencer smile for a sneer that was all teeth. "What are you doing here? Did you run out of dumpsters to sleep in?" She was close enough now that I could smell her perfume, something heavy and floral that cloyed at the back of my throat. The guests in the lobby had stopped their conversations. The ambient jazz music seemed to fade away, replaced by the heavy tension of a public execution. My mother, Vivian, stepped forward. She looked impeccable, as always. Her diamonds caught the light of the chandelier, sending fractured rainbows across the room. She moved into my personal space, ignoring the social distance required by decency. She leaned in, her lips barely moving, her voice a hiss, meant only for me. "Look at you," Vivian whispered, You look like a member of the housekeeping staff who got lost on her way to the service elevator. You are embarrassing us. Melody, you smell like poverty." The words were designed to hurt. 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I would have shrunk into myself, apologized for existing, and tried to make myself smaller, but the woman standing before them now was made of scar tissue and steel. I met my mother's gaze, my expression flat. "Nice to see you too, Mother," I said calmly. "Happy anniversary." "Do not call her that," a booming voice commanded. Charles Dunn pushed past his wife. My father looked older, the lines around his mouth deeper, etched by years of frowning at a world that never quite met his standards. He did not look me in the eyes. He looked over my shoulder, signaling to the large man in the dark suit standing by the door. "Security!" Charles barked. "Remove this person. She is trespassing." "I am a guest," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse was hammering a war drum against my ribs. "I have a room." "I do not care if you have a deed to the city," Charles spat, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. "You are not welcome in the Opaline Summit. You are not welcome in my life. You are a stain. Melody, a stain we washed out a decade ago. Now get out before I have you thrown out." The security guard, a man whose neck was wider than my head, began to approach. The guests were whispering now. Phones out, recording the spectacle. I was the entertainment. I was the freak show. Ava turned back to her phone, her eyes gleaming with malicious delight. She was thriving on the drama, feeding on my humiliation. "You heard him!" Ava screamed, her voice echoing off the high vaulted ceilings. "Get out! Get out of this luxury hotel! You do not belong here! You never did!" Then, Logan stepped forward. My brother-in-law had a face that belonged on a magazine cover and a soul that belonged in a sewer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. He smirked at me, a look of pure, unadulterated condescension. "Maybe she just needs bus fare." "Charles," Logan said, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "Is that it, Mel? You need a little cash to get back to whatever hole you crawled out of?" He opened the wallet. He pulled out a crisp, fresh $100 bill. He flicked his wrist. The bill fluttered through the air, drifting slowly before slapping against my shoulder and falling to the floor. "There," Logan said, "buy yourself a sandwich." He pulled out another, then another. He threw them at my face. One hit my cheek, the sharp edge of the new paper stinging like a paper cut. Another hit my chest. The last two landed on my shoes. $500. It lay scattered on the pristine marble floor, green against white. Laughter erupted from the onlookers. It started as a titter from a group of women in cocktail dresses near the bar, then spread like a contagion. They were laughing at the beggar being fed by the prince. They were laughing at the sheer brutality of it. I looked down at the money. For a split second, the room spun, the timeline fractured. I was 22 again. I was standing on the front porch of the family estate in the pouring rain. My father had just locked the door. I had $40 to my name. I was hungry. I was terrified. I had banged on the door for an hour, begging them to just let me get my coat, my paints, anything. They had turned off the porch lights. I had slept in the bus station that night, clutching my bag, praying morning would come before the cold took me. I remembered the taste of cheap ramen. I remembered the humiliation of dodging the landlord when I was short on rent. I remembered working 3 shifts, my feet bleeding, just to save enough for community college classes. I remembered the value of a single dollar. $500 used to be 3 months of food. The old Melody, the frightened girl, wanted to bend down. Her instinct was to scramble for the cash, to salvage some dignity by at least having the means to survive. But I killed that girl a long time ago. I lifted my chin. I looked at Logan, who was wiping his hand on his pants as if he had touched something filthy. I looked at Ava, who was preening for her camera, ensuring she got the best angle of my degradation. I looked at Charles and Vivian, who wore expressions of triumphant disgust. They thought they had won. They thought this was the end of the scene. I took a step forward. I did not bend. I did not kneel. I placed the heel of my dirty, scuffed canvas sneaker directly onto the face of Benjamin Franklin on the bill closest to me. I pressed down. I ground the sole of my shoe into the paper, twisting my foot until the bill crinkled and tore against the stone. The laughter in the room died instantly. Silence, heavy and thick, rushed back in to fill the void. I stepped over the rest of the money, leaving $400 lying there like trash. To me, right now, that is exactly what it was. Trash. I walked past Logan. He flinched, just slightly, as if he expected me to strike him. I didn't even look at him. He wasn't worth the energy of a glance. I walked straight to the reception desk, where the young woman was staring at me with her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and confusion. She had expected me to cry. She had expected me to run. I leaned over the counter, invading her space just enough to make her uncomfortable. I kept my voice low, intimate, terrifyingly calm. "Keep the room," I said. "Do not cancel the reservation." "But Mr. Dunn said," she stammered, glancing nervously at my father, who was too stunned by my refusal of the money to speak. "Mr. Dunn is having a very emotional evening," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "But I paid with a valid card, and I suggest you keep that payment on file." I leaned in closer, dropping my voice to a whisper that only she could hear. "Because after midnight tonight, a lot of the other cards in this building are going to stop working. You do not want to be the one explaining to the owner why you turned away the only solvent guest in the hotel." I pulled back, giving her a small, tight smile that did not reach my eyes. "Send my bags up. I will take a walk while the trash is taken out." I turned on my heel and walked toward the elevators. My back straight, my head high. I could feel their eyes boring into my spine. I could feel Ava's camera lens zooming in. I could feel the confusion radiating off my parents. They had thrown money at me to make me feel poor. They didn't realize that in my world, you don't throw money away unless you have so much of it that it means absolutely nothing. I left the $500 on the floor. Let them pick it up. They were going to need every penny. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing out the hum of the lobby and the lingering scent of my sister's perfume. I swiped the black key card, not the one for the guest suite, but a master administrator card that my legal team had couriered to me 3 hours ago. The light turned green, and I pressed the button for the 25th floor. This floor did not exist on the guest directory. It was the nerve center, the administrative heart of the Opaline Summit. When the doors opened, the air was different here. It smelled of ozone, coffee, and panic. Waiting for me at the end of the corridor, pacing back and forth on the plush gray carpet, was Arthur Larkin, the general manager. He looked 10 years older than his bio photo on the company website. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and sweat was beading on his forehead despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Ms. Dunn," he breathed out, rushing forward but stopping short of shaking my hand, unsure of the protocol. "Or is it Ms. Vane?" "In here, it is Ms. Dunn," I said, walking past him toward the executive suite. "Downstairs, I am a ghost. Up here, I am the executioner. Let us go to your office. Arthur." He scrambled to unlock the door with a trembling hand. Inside, the office was a chaotic mess of files and takeout boxes, a stark contrast to the polished perfection of the lobby. It was the cockpit of a plane that was nosediving. "Lock the door," I commanded, "and turn off the internal intercom." Larkin obeyed. "I saw what happened in the lobby on the security feed," he said, his voice quiet. "I wanted to intervene, but your instructions were specific, total non-interference." "You did your job," I said, taking the seat behind his desk. It was a power move, and he accepted it immediately, standing on the other side like a reprimanded schoolboy. "Now, show me the dashboard. The real one, not the sanitized version you send to the shareholders." Larkin typed a password into his terminal and spun the large monitor toward me. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the data with the speed of a forensic accountant. The numbers were not just bad, they were catastrophic. "The operating capital is negative," I noted, my finger tracing the red line on the graph. How are the lights still on? Vendor credit, Larkin admitted. And wow, we have been deferring maintenance costs. I swiped to the expense ledger labeled Dunn Family Personal Accounts. It was a bloodbath. Look at this, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. For the last 9 months, the hotel has absorbed the cost of 3 private jet charters for Logan Pierce, spa treatments for Ava, totaling $40,000, a wine cellar replenishment for Charles, costing $15,000. They are treating the operational revenue like a personal piggy bank. They say they will pay it back, Larkin said weakly. They call it internal loans. It is embezzlement, I corrected him, and it is stripping the asset value to 0. I continued scrolling. Then I stopped. I froze. On the screen was a digital copy of a loan guarantee document with a local bank, dated 3 months ago. It was a short-term bridge loan for $2 million, used to cover payroll. At the bottom of the document was the signature of the guarantor, Melody Dunn. I stared at the looping script. It was a good forgery. It looked almost exactly like the way I signed my name when I was 20. Arthur, I said, the temperature in the room dropping 10 degrees. Where is the physical copy of this document? Larkin looked pale. He walked to a safe in the corner, punched in a code, and retrieved a blue folder. He placed it on the desk with shaking hands. I opened it. The ink was real. Who submitted this? I asked. Your father, Larkin whispered. He told the bank that you were a silent partner. He said you had reconciled with the family privately and were pledging your trust fund, the one your grandmother left you, as collateral for the hotel's liquidity. I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. My grandmother's trust fund, the one they tried to drain before I turned 18? They think I still have that little pot of gold? The bank believed it, Larkin said. They approved the loan based on the Dunn family name and your assets. This is fraud, I said, closing the folder. Not just civil fraud. This is criminal identity theft and bank fraud. They are using the name of the daughter they kicked out to keep their empire on life support. It made sense now. The audacity. They didn't just hate me. They needed me. They needed the idea of me. The silent, absent Melody who could be used as a financial ghost to prop up their lies. There is more, Larkin said. He looked like he might throw up. The gala tonight. It is not just an anniversary party. He pulled up a presentation deck on the screen. The title slide read, Dunn Elevation Night. Exclusive investment opportunity. What is this? I asked. They are launching a private equity round tonight, Larkin explained. Your father is pitching to 50 of the wealthiest investors in the state. He is selling 40% equity in the Opaline Summit to raise $20 million. I clicked through the slides. The graphics were beautiful. The projections were optimistic. And the assets page was a lie. They are listing the hotel as debt-free, I said, pointing to the screen. They are claiming unencumbered ownership. They did not disclose the Northbridge Vale bond debt. They did not disclose the liens. No, Larkin said. They told the investors that the recent cash infusion, the one from the loan they forged your name on, was pure profit. I sat back in the chair, steepling my fingers. This was bigger than I thought. This wasn't just a failing business. It was a Ponzi scheme in the making. They were going to take $20 million from investors tonight, use it to pay off the bank loan they frauded, and pocket the rest, leaving the new investors holding shares in a company that I was about to foreclose on. If they collect a single check tonight, I said, it is a federal crime, wire fraud, securities fraud. What do we do? Larkin asked. Do I cancel the gala? Do I pull the fire alarm? No, I said instantly. If you cancel it, they will spin a story. They will blame a technical issue. They will reschedule. They will survive. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the manicured gardens where the staff were setting up tables for the evening. We let the show go on, I said. We let them walk onto that stage. We let them make their pitch. We let them dig their graves so deep that they can never climb out. I turned back to Larkin. I need eyes and ears, Arthur, the hotel security system is controlled by the head of security, and he is loyal to my father. I cannot trust it. I have a contact, Larkin said. An independent AV team. They do concert setups. They can rig a parallel system. Do it, I commanded. I want high-definition audio and video recording in the ballroom, the VIP holding room, and the hallways leading to the exits. I want microphones at the head table. I want to hear every whisper. And I want the feed routed directly to this office and to my cloud server. Call it Protocol Aurora. Protocol Aurora, Larkin repeated, writing it down. I will get them in through the service bay within the hour. We will disguise them as lighting technicians. Good. I looked back at the monitor. I switched the view to the live security feed of the lobby. I saw my family. They were still there, standing in a circle near the fountain. Charles was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, clapping a potential investor on the back. Vivian was adjusting Ava's hair. Logan was checking his watch, looking bored but expensive. They looked invincible. They looked like royalty holding court. They had absolutely no idea that the homeless girl they had just mocked was currently sitting in the captain's chair, holding the detonator to their entire world. Look at them, I said softly. They are celebrating. They think they have pulled it off, Larkin said. They think the past is dead, I replied. They think I am just a painful memory they can throw money at to make go away. I reached out and touched the screen, my finger hovering over my father's smiling face. Enjoy the champagne, Charles, I whispered. It is the last bottle you will ever own. I stood up and smoothed down my hoodie. I am going to my suite to shower and change. I have a role to play tonight. Keep the feed running. Arthur, record everything. If anyone sneezes, I want it on tape. Yes, Ms. Dunn. And Arthur? I paused at the door. If my family asks about the system glitch or the extra technicians, I will tell them we are enhancing the production value for their big night, Larkin said, a glimmer of rebellion finally entering his eyes. Perfect, I said. I walked out of the office. The digital copy of the forged signature burned into my mind. The game had changed. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a cleanup operation, and I was the janitor who was going to take out the trash. The hallway leading to the royal suite was lined with plush velvet wallpaper that dampened every sound, creating a silence that felt heavy and suffocating. I walked down the corridor, my sneakers sinking into the thick carpet, measuring my breathing. This was the hallway where I had spent the worst night of my life 10 years ago. I had sat curled up against the baseboards right outside the double mahogany doors, shivering and knocking until my knuckles bled, begging my parents to let me in. They had turned up the television volume to drown me out. Now, I was walking back toward those doors not as a beggar, but as a creditor coming to collect a debt that had nothing to do with money. A young housekeeper pushed a cart out of a side room, looking startled to see someone dressed in a hoodie on the VIP floor. She kept her head down. Sensing the tension radiating off me like heat waves, I nodded to her, a silent acknowledgement that I saw her, before I stopped in front of the suite. I did not knock. I pressed the buzzer, holding it down for 3 long seconds. I heard muffled footsteps, the click of a lock, and then the door swung open. Ava stood there, a glass of champagne halfway to her mouth. She was still in her silk robe, her hair half done for the evening. When she saw me, she choked on her drink, coughing and spluttering as her eyes went wide. "What the hell?" she wheezed, lowering the glass. "How did you get up here? Security!" She turned to shout into the room, but I stepped past her, crossing the threshold into the suite before she could slam the door in my face. The room smelled of expensive lilies and the lingering scent of hairspray. It was opulent, gold and cream, exactly as my mother liked it. "Security is not coming, Ava," I said, my voice calm. "Not for me." Vivian and Charles were sitting on the cream-colored sofas in the living area, reviewing a stack of index cards, speeches for the gala. When they saw me, my mother dropped her cards. They scattered across the glass coffee table like dead leaves. "You," Vivian hissed, standing up, her face twisted into a mask of pure revulsion. "I thought we had you thrown out. How dare you stalk us to our room? You are like a tick, Melody, a parasite that just burrows in and refuses to let go. Call the front desk, Charles, she snapped at my father. Tell them to send the police this time. I want her arrested for trespassing. Charles stood up, his face flushing that dangerous purple color again. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You have 5 seconds to leave before I have you dragged out in handcuffs. Do you think putting on a brave face downstairs makes you one of us? You are playing dress-up. Melody, you are pretending to be something you are not. Am I? I asked, walking further into the room. I stopped by the grand piano, running a finger along the dust-free lid. Because from where I am standing, I am the only person in this room who isn't pretending. What is that supposed to mean? Ava demanded, marching over to stand by our parents. She crossed her arms, trying to look intimidating, but I could see the uncertainty flickering in her eyes. She was used to me cowering. My stillness was confusing her. It means I know about the loan, Charles, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when the air is sucked out of a room by an explosion that hasn't made a sound yet. Charles lowered his hand. Vivian went very still. Ava blinked, looking between them. I saw the paperwork, I continued, keeping my eyes locked on my father. The liquidity bridge loan from First City Bank, $2 million, approved 3 months ago. So? Charles tried to bluster, but his voice cracked. That is company business. It is none of your concern. It became my concern when you used my name as the guarantor, I said. I watched the color drain from Ava's face. She knew. They all knew. I never signed that document, I said, stepping closer. I have not spoken to you in 10 years, yet there is a signature on the bottom line that looks remarkably like mine. That is forgery. That is bank fraud. That is a federal crime that carries a prison sentence of up to 30 years. For a moment, nobody moved. The housekeeper, who had been fluffing pillows in the corner, stopped her work, shrinking back against the wall, terrified and invisible to them. Then, Ava let out a short, incredulous laugh. Oh, grow up, Melody, she spat. I turned to look at my sister. Grow up? You should be grateful, Ava said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. We gave you a purpose. You were doing nothing with your life. At least this way. Your name is actually worth something. You finally got to contribute to the family legacy. We did you a favor. The sheer delusion of it took my breath away. She truly believed it. In her warped, narcissistic mind, stealing my identity to cover their debts was an act of charity. You stole my identity, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You risked my financial future to pay for your parties and your jets. You did not do me a favor. Ava, you committed a felony. We did what was necessary, Vivian interjected, stepping in front of Ava like a lioness protecting a cub, even though the cub was a 30-year-old woman. We built this family. We built this hotel. If we have to borrow a little credibility from you to keep it afloat, that is our right. We gave you life, Melody. You owe us everything. I owe you nothing, I said. And neither does the bank. When I report this tomorrow. You will do no such thing, Charles growled, stepping toward me with his fists clenched. You will keep your mouth shut. Who are they going to believe? The pillars of the community? Or the estranged daughter who showed up looking like a vagrant? They will believe the handwriting expert, I replied, and they will believe the audit trail. You selfish bitch, Ava screamed. She closed the distance between us in 2 strides. I saw the movement coming, but I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. Ava's hand connected with my cheek. Crack. The sound was sharp and loud, echoing off the high ceilings. It wasn't a theatrical slap. It was hard, fueled by years of jealousy and entitlement. My head snapped to the side. A stinging heat bloomed instantly across my skin, radiating into my jaw. I tasted a distinct metallic tang of blood where my tooth had cut the inside of my cheek. The room froze. The housekeeper gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I kept my face turned for a moment, letting the sting settle. letting the reality of what just happened sink into the marrow of my bones. Slowly, I turned my head back to face them. Ava was breathing hard, her hands still raised slightly, her chest heaving. There was a flicker of fear in her eyes now, the realization that she had crossed a physical line. "You," Ava started, but her voice wavered. "You deserved that. You come in here threatening us." "She saw that," I said quietly, pointing to the housekeeper in the corner. Vivian spun around, noticing the maid for the first time. "You?" my mother barked at the terrified girl. "Get out, and if you say a word about what you saw in this room, you are fired. You will be blacklisted from every hotel in the state. Do you hear me?" The girl nodded frantically, grabbing her card and rushing for the door. "Get out!" Vivian screamed after her. When the door clicked shut, my mother turned her glare back to me. "See? Nobody cares. Melody, nobody will help you. Now get out of my suite before I have Logan come in here and finish what Ava started." I lifted my hand and touched my cheek. The skin felt hot and tight. I looked at Ava. She was waiting for me to cry. She was waiting for me to scream, to fight back, to descend into the chaos that she thrived on. She wanted a cat fight. She wanted to prove that we were the same. But I was not the same. I lowered my hand and looked at the blood on my fingertips. "That," I said, my voice so calm it sounded like a stranger's, "was the most expensive mistake you have ever made." Ava rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, what are you going to do? Sue me for assault? I have lawyers who cost more than your life." "No," I said, "I am not going to sue you, Ava." I took a step back, smoothing the front of my hoodie. The anger that had been burning inside me, the hot, volatile anger of the rejected child, suddenly cooled. It solidified into something hard and sharp, like a blade of ice. I realized then that I had been holding back. A part of me, a small, foolish part, had still wanted an apology. I had wanted them to admit they were wrong. I had wanted them to be parents. But that slap killed the child in me. It killed the hope. "I am not going to sue you," I repeated, "and I am not going to call the police for this." I looked at Charles, then Vivian, and finally rested my gaze on Ava. "This slap is lighter than the consequence you are about to face," I said. "Enjoy your gala tonight. Wear your best dress. Smile for the cameras." I turned and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Charles demanded, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, sensing that he had lost control of the room. "We are not finished here." I opened the door and paused, looking back at them one last time. They looked like a painting of a happy family that was slowly melting in a fire. "Yes," I said, "we are finished." I walked out and let the heavy door slam shut behind me. My cheek throbbed, pulsing in time with my heart. I walked down the silent hallway, past the velvet wallpaper, past the spot where I had once begged for love. I didn't wipe the blood from my lip. I wanted to taste it. I wanted to remember it. I pulled out my phone and dialed Larkin. "It is me," I said. "Is the recording system live?" "Yes, Ms. Dunn," Larkin replied. "We are online." "Good," I said. "And Arthur? The housekeeper who just left the royal suite? Find her, give her a raise, and tell her she is a protected witness." "Understood." "And one more thing," I said, stepping into the elevator. "Release the funds for the catering. Let them have the champagne. I want them drunk. I want them happy. I want them to feel like they are on top of the world." "Why?" Larkin asked. "Because the fall is fatal only if you drop them from a sufficient height," I said. The elevator doors closed, and I watched my reflection in the polished steel. My cheek was red. My eyes were dry. The mourning period was over. The execution had begun. I locked the door to the general manager's office behind me, the heavy click of the deadbolt echoing like a gunshot in the sudden silence. My cheek was still throbbing, a hot, rhythmic pulse that served as a constant reminder of the line that had been crossed upstairs. I walked straight to the desk where Arthur Larkin was waiting. He was pale, his eyes darting between the security monitors and the secure laptop I had set up earlier. "Connect her," I said, my voice devoid of tremor. Larkin nodded and hit the enter key. The screen flickered, and Maya, my lead counsel at Northbridge Vale, appeared. The background behind her was the dark glass of our headquarters in Chicago. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp, predatory. "Melody," Maya said, skipping the pleasantries. "I saw the medical report Larkin just filed in the incident log. Assault? Do you want to press charges immediately?" "No," I said, pulling a chair up to the desk. "Assault is a misdemeanor compared to what we are looking at now. Tell me you found it." Maya looked down at her notes. "We dug into the shell company behind the Dunn Legacy Fund. Melody, this is not just bad accounting. This is a federal crime scene. We found a series of wire transfers moving through 3 different offshore entities, all routing back to a personal account held by Charles Dunn in the Cayman Islands. They are not investing the capital they are raising. They are cycling it." "A Ponzi scheme," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "A textbook one," Maya confirmed. "They are using new investor money to pay out dividends to the old investors to keep them quiet, but the burn rate is too high. The math says they have about 48 hours of liquidity left. If they do not raise $20 million at the gala tonight, the checks they wrote last week will bounce." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. My father wasn't just a failure. He was a criminal, and he was dragging the entire town of Silver Rock down with him. "What is the exposure for Opaline Summit?" I asked. "Total," Maya said. "They listed the hotel as the primary asset backing the fund. If the fund collapses, the creditors will strip the hotel to the studs. The staff will lose their pensions. The vendors will never get paid." "Not if I take it first," I said. I looked at Larkin. "Arthur, bring up the debt covenant agreement. Section 8, paragraph 3. Larkin typed furiously. The document appeared on the main screen. "The material adverse change clause," I recited from memory. "In the event of suspected criminal activity or gross mismanagement that threatens the asset's value, the primary bondholder has the right to initiate an immediate, temporary receivership to protect the collateral." "That is the nuclear option, Melody," Maya warned. "Once you trigger that, you are legally the operator. You are responsible." "I am already responsible," I said, touching the red mark on my cheek. "They made it my problem when they forged my signature. Activate it. Maya, file the emergency motion. I want the legal title of this building in the hands of the Northbridge Trust by the time the appetizers are served." "Consider it done," Maya said. She paused, tapping her pen against her lip. "There is something else. When we cross-referenced the SEC filings, we found a flagged file. Someone else has been sending them documents." I froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there is a mole," Maya said. "An anonymous whistleblower submitted a cache of internal emails and bank statements to the Securities and Exchange Commission 2 days ago. That is why the federal agents are in town. They did not come just because of us. Someone inside the family circle invited them." I looked at the security feed on the wall. The camera cycled through the VIP suite. Charles was pacing. Vivian was fixing her makeup. Ava was scrolling on her phone. "Who?" I asked. "We do not know," Maya replied. "The source is listed as John Doe in the discovery file, but whoever it is, they provided the smoking gun. They gave the investigators the exact dates of the wire transfers." My mind raced. Charles wouldn't turn himself in. Vivian was too obsessed with image to destroy her own pedestal. Ava was not smart enough to understand the wire transfers, let alone report them. That left one person. I looked at the monitor again. Logan Pierce was standing in the corner of the suite, pouring a drink. He looked detached, his eyes cold as he watched his wife and in-laws. "Interesting," I murmured. "Keep digging. Maya, if there is a rat on the ship, I want to know before it sinks." "I will," Maya said. "The filing is processing. You are officially the interim owner of the Opaline Summit. Good hunting. Melody." The screen went black. I turned to Larkin. The general manager looked terrified. He was a hotelier, not a soldier, and he had just realized he was standing on a battlefield. "It is done," I told him. "Technically, you report to me now, not Charles." "What are your orders?" Larkin asked, straightening his tie. We need to protect the innocent, I said. Tonight is going to get ugly. When the federal agents move in, there will be panic. I do not want guests getting trampled, and I do not want the staff getting caught in the crossfire. Larkin nodded. I have drafted a plan. I am calling it Protocol Aurora. He slid a floor plan across the desk. It was marked with red and blue zones. We seal the service corridors, Larkin explained, tracing the lines with his finger. We station plainclothes security at the main exits of the ballroom, not to stop people from leaving, but to guide the flow. We designate the kitchen as a safe zone for the staff. If things go wrong, the servers retreat to the kitchen, and we lock the doors from the inside. Good, I said. And the guests? We keep the bar open, Larkin said pragmatically. People panic less when they have a drink in their hand, but we need to make sure the arrest happens in the ballroom. If Charles makes it to the lobby or the parking lot, it becomes a chase. We need to contain him. We need a stage, I corrected. He loves an audience. We give him one. I pointed to the VIP table on the diagram. It was front and center, right next to the podium. I want that table wired, I ordered. I want high-definition microphones under the tablecloth. I want a camera in the floral centerpiece. I want a camera in the ceiling directly above them. If they whisper a single word to each other, I want to hear it. The AV team is already rigging it, Larkin assured me. They are disguising the microphones as part of the centerpiece lighting. I picked up a pen and pulled a fresh sheet of paper from the printer tray. It was a formal affidavit Maya had emailed over, a document stating that I, Melody Dunn, was cooperating fully with the Department of Justice and providing access to all hotel records to assist in the prosecution of Charles and Vivian Dunn. My hand hovered over the signature line. 10 years ago, signing a paper for my father meant signing away my freedom or my dignity. Today, it meant signing his warrant. I thought about the $500 on the floor. I thought about the slap. I thought about the parasite comment. I signed my name. The ink flowed dark and permanent. Fax this to the lead investigator, I told Larkin, handing him the paper. Let them know the door is open. They do not need a warrant to enter the premises. I am inviting them in. Larkin took the paper with reverence, as if it were a death sentence. He walked to the fax machine in the corner. I pulled out my phone. I needed to do one last thing. I needed to make sure Charles was focused on me, not on the exits. I needed to bait the trap. I opened my email app and composed a new message. To Charles. Done at Opaline Group. Subject, the ownership. I typed the body of the email slowly, savoring every letter. Charles. You think banning me from the lobby removes me from the equation. You have forgotten how this business works. You look at the paint on the walls. I look at the paper they are printed on. Tonight, at the gala, you are going to stand on that stage and lie to 50 people. But before you do, look at the back of the room. You will see who really owns this place, and it is not you. Enjoy the spotlight. Melody. I hit send. I swiveled my chair to face the wall of monitors. Zoom in on camera 4, I commanded. The suite living room. Larkin adjusted the controls. The image on the screen zoomed in on my father. He was standing by the window, adjusting his cufflinks. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. I watched as he picked it up. He squinted at the screen, his brow furrowing. I saw his lips move as he read the message. For a second, I expected fear. I expected him to look around, to check the door. Instead, Charles threw his head back and laughed. It was a dismissive, arrogant laugh. He shook his head, typed a quick delete command, and tossed the phone back onto the sofa like it was a piece of junk. He turned to Vivian and said something that made her smirk. He didn't believe me. He thought it was the desperate rant of a disowned child trying to ruin his night with empty threats. He thought he was untouchable. I watched him laugh, and a cold calm settled over me. He deleted it, Larkin observed nervously. Of course he did, I said, standing up and zipping my hoodie all the way to my chin. He thinks he is a king. I walked to the door. checking my reflection in the glass of a framed award. My eyes looked different, harder. "Let's go downstairs. Arthur," I said, "it is time to crash the party." The service corridors of the opaline summit were a stark contrast to the gold-leafed opulence of the guest areas. Here, under the hum of fluorescent lights, the walls were scuffed concrete, and the air smelled of industrial dish soap and impending chaos. I moved through the labyrinthine hallways, avoiding the main thoroughfares. I knew these paths better than anyone. I had spent my childhood hiding in them to escape my mother's criticism. I was heading toward the ballroom's rear entrance to check the camera angles personally, when I heard a voice. It was low, urgent, and echoing from a small alcove near the freight elevator, a spot usually reserved for catering staff to take smoke breaks. I stopped. I knew that voice. It was the smooth, practiced baritone of a man who sold lies for a living. Logan Pierce. I pressed my back against the cold concrete wall, holding my breath. I slid my phone out of my pocket, tapped the recording app, and held it steady. "No, you are not listening to me," Logan hissed into his phone. "I do not care about the penalty fees. Move the liquidity to the Seychelles account now. Tonight, yes, before the market opens tomorrow." I raised an eyebrow. The Seychelles, a classic destination for money that did not want to be found. "Listen, the ship is taking on water faster than I thought," Logan continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The old man is delusional. He thinks this gala is going to save him. But the books are cooked, burnt to a crisp. I need my share out before the feds realize the Dunn Elevation Fund is just a fancy way of saying Ponzi scheme. Just do it." He hung up. I heard him exhale, a long, shaky breath that betrayed the cool facade he wore in public. I stepped out from the shadows. "Going somewhere, Logan?" He jumped, nearly dropping his phone. He spun around, his eyes wide with panic, before recognizing me. The fear was instantly replaced by a sneer, but I saw the tremor in his hands. He smoothed his tuxedo jacket, trying to regain the upper hand. "Melody," he said, forcing a chuckle that sounded like dry leaves being crushed. "You have a bad habit of lurking in dark corners. It fits you, though. Scavengers usually prefer the dark. And rats usually prefer the sewers," I countered, walking closer until I was just outside his personal space. "I heard the call. Logan? The Seychelles? Really? That is a bit cliché, even for you." Logan's eyes narrowed. He looked past me, checking the hallway to ensure we were alone. When he saw no security, his shoulders relaxed, and his posture shifted. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to bluff. Instead, a strange, oily smile spread across his face. "You think you have caught me," Logan said, leaning against the wall with casual arrogance. "You think you can run to Daddy and tell him his son-in-law is betting against the house?" "I think Charles is going to be in handcuffs before he can do anything about it," I said. "And I think you are trying to make sure you are not handcuffed next to him." Logan laughed. It was a genuine sound this time, devoid of the performance he put on for Ava. "Handcuffs? For me? Please, Melody, you are smart. I always thought you were the only one in this family with a brain, which is why I was surprised you came back. But you are missing a piece of the puzzle." He took a step toward me, lowering his voice. "Who do you think called the SEC?" I froze. My mind flashed back to the conversation with Maya in the office. The anonymous whistleblower. John Doe, who had handed the investigators the smoking gun. "You?" I asked, skepticism dripping from my voice. "You turned them in?" "I am a businessman," Logan said, checking his manicured fingernails. "I saw the writing on the wall 6 months ago. Charles is a dinosaur. He thinks he can charm his way out of math, but the numbers do not lie. The debt was spiraling, and he started pulling from the escrow accounts. Illegal, highly illegal." "So you decided to be a hero?" I scoffed. "I decided to be a survivor," Logan corrected. "I cut a deal. Immunity in exchange for evidence. I hand over the ledgers. I testify that I was just a concerned consultant who discovered the fraud too late, and I walk away with my reputation intact. And of course, a small consulting fee I skimmed off the top for my troubles. I stared at him. The sheer calculation was breathtaking. He wasn't just leaving the sinking ship. He was the one who had torpedoed it. And now he was stealing the lifeboats. "Does Ava know?" I asked. Logan rolled his eyes. "Ava? Please. Ava thinks equity is a brand of horse feed. If I told her, she would scream, cry, and call her mother. She is a liability. Melody, she is not a partner." "She is your wife," I said. "She is carrying your name." "She is an anchor," Logan said coldly, "and I plan to cut the rope tonight. Once Charles is arrested, the Dunn name will be poison. I do not intend to be attached to it." He stepped closer, his voice turning persuasive, almost seductive in its sliminess. "We are on the same side here, Mel. You want them destroyed. I want them gone so I can move on. We can help each other." "How?" I asked, keeping my face neutral, masking the revulsion churning in my gut. "I know you are the one holding the bond debt," Logan said. "I did my homework on Northbridge Vale. You are going to seize the hotel. Fine, take it. It is a money pit anyway. But I have files that the SEC does not have yet. Internal memos where Charles explicitly orders the forgery of your signature. Emails where Vivian discusses bribing the zoning commissioner." My heart skipped a beat. That was the nail in the coffin. That was the evidence that would ensure they didn't just get fined, but went to prison for a very long time. "You want to trade?" I stated. "I give you the files," Logan said. "Right now, a direct transfer. In exchange, you keep my name out of your civil suit. You let me walk away from the hotel's financial collapse without coming after my personal assets." It was a deal with the devil. He wanted to keep the money he had stolen from my family's fraudulent empire, and in return, he would hand me the weapon to execute them. "I want the files," I said. "Send them." "Do we have a deal?" Logan pressed. "I need your word. Melody, one shark to another." I looked at him. I saw the $500 he had thrown in my face just an hour ago. I saw the way he looked at my sister, not with love, but with the contempt of a man discarding a used tissue. "I promise you this," I said carefully. "If you give me that evidence, I will ensure that justice is served exactly as it should be, and I will not personally sue you for the debt." It was a carefully worded sentence. I wouldn't sue him. The federal government, however, was a different story. And I never promised I wouldn't hand the new evidence over to them. Logan, blinded by his own arrogance, heard what he wanted to hear. He smiled, pulling out his phone. "Smart girl," he said. "Open your airdrop." I unlocked my phone and enabled the transfer. A moment later, a heavy file named Dunn Internal Black Ledger, zip appeared on my screen. I accepted it. The progress bar spun for 10 agonizing seconds before the circle completed. I tapped the file, opening a random PDF. It was an email from Charles to Logan, dated 4 months ago. Subject: The Melody Problem. Body: Just sign it. Logan: She is never coming back. Use the old birthday card for reference. We need that loan by Friday or payroll bounces. I stared at the screen. Charles hadn't just forged it. He had ordered Logan to do it, and Logan had complied. And now, Logan was handing me the proof of his own complicity, thinking his immunity deal covered it. But immunity deals usually get voided if the witness was the one who physically committed the crime. "Got it?" Logan asked, buttoning his jacket. "Pleasure doing business with you. Mel, I suggest you get a front row seat. I am going to slip out the back once the speeches start." "You are not staying for the toast?" I asked, tucking my phone away. "I prefer to watch the fireworks from a distance," Logan winked. "Give my regards to your sister. Tell her nothing. She will figure it out when her credit cards stop working." He turned and walked toward the freight elevator, whistling a low, happy tune. I watched him go. The moment the elevator doors slid shut, hiding his smug face, I pulled my earpiece out of my pocket and put it in. "Larkin," I said, my voice sharp. "Did you get that?" Audio and video clear as day. Larkin's voice crackled in my ear. "We have him on tape admitting to the wire transfers and disparaging the co-conspirators." "Good," I said. "Send the file I just received to the lead investigator immediately. And Arthur?" "Yes, Ms. Dunn?" "Update the guest list for the federal agents," I said, walking briskly back toward the office. "Logan Pierce is no longer a voluntary witness. I want him added to the mandatory detainment list. He is a flight risk. He just admitted he plans to leave the country tonight." "But the deal?" Larkin asked, sounding confused. "You said—" "I said I would not sue him," I replied, a cold smile touching my lips. "I never said I would stop the FBI from arresting him for forgery. His immunity deal covers reporting the fraud, not committing the identity theft himself. He just handed us the proof that he held the pen." "Understood," Larkin said. "I will flag him for the agents at the door. He won't make it to the parking lot." I stopped at the end of the corridor and looked at the closed doors of the ballroom. I could hear the muffled sounds of the orchestra warming up. The trap was set. The players were in position. Logan thought he was the player. He thought he was the grandmaster moving the pawns. He didn't realize that on my board, even the knights get sacrificed. He had betrayed his wife, his in-laws, and his own integrity. He was willing to sell out the woman he slept next to for a clean getaway. "When Ava finds out," I whispered to the empty hallway, "it is going to break her." And for the first time all night, I felt a twinge of something that wasn't quite satisfaction. It was pity, not for the sister who had slapped me, but for the woman who was currently fixing her hair in a mirror upstairs, completely unaware that the husband she adored had just sold her out for a plane ticket to the Seychelles. But the pity was fleeting. They had built their house on a foundation of lies. I was just turning on the lights. I adjusted my hoodie, turned the corner, and walked toward the darkness of the backstage area. The curtain was about to rise. The transition from the hoodie to the dress was not just a change of clothes, it was a change of skin. In the quiet sanctuary of the presidential suite, I had peeled off the denim and the canvas sneakers, the uniform of the outcast, and slipped into something that felt like war paint. The dress was a structured column of black silk that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. It had sharp lines, a high neck, and a back that plunged dangerously low. It was the kind of dress that did not ask for attention. It commanded it by sheer force of gravity. I pulled my hair back into a severe, sleek knot and painted my lips a shade of red that was darker than blood. I looked in the mirror. The red mark on my cheek from Ava's slap had faded under a layer of foundation, but the phantom sting remained. It was the fuel I needed. I checked my phone. One message from Larkin. "Green light, we are recording." I took the service elevator down to the ballroom level. I did not want to be announced. I did not want a grand entrance through the double doors just yet. I wanted to be a shadow before I became the spotlight. The grand ballroom of the Opaline Summit was a spectacle of golden light and manufactured joy. As I slipped in through the side entrance, staying deep in the gloom behind the heavy velvet curtains, the sensory overload hit me. The air smelled of roasted duck, expensive perfume, and the distinct, metallic scent of greed. A 20-piece orchestra was playing a waltz, the music swelling to cover the sound of silverware scraping against china. The room was packed. 500 guests, the elite of Silver Rock and the unsuspecting whales my father was hunting. I watched from the darkness, my eyes scanning the room like a sniper. There was the head table, raised on a dais like a throne room, and there were the players in this tragedy. Ava was seated to the right of the podium, looking radiant in her crimson gown. She was laughing at something a senator's wife was saying, her hand resting possessively on Logan's arm. She looked at him with such adoration, such total trust. She was leaning into him, whispering in his ear, probably sharing a joke about the beggar they had encountered in the lobby. She had absolutely no idea that the man she was clinging to had just sold her out for a wire transfer to the Seychelles. Logan sat beside her, the picture of the devoted husband. He nodded, smiled, and clinked his glass with hers, but I could see the tightness in his jaw. I saw his eyes darting toward the exit signs every 30 seconds. He was a rat looking for a hole, but he was playing the part of the prince until the very last second. And then there was Vivian. My mother was working the room, moving between tables with a champagne flute in hand. I drifted closer, keeping to the shadows of the pillars, until I was close enough to hear her voice over the swell of the violins. She was speaking to Mrs. Gable, a wealthy widow who had known our family for 30 years. "Oh, the anniversary is lovely. Thank you," Vivian was saying, her voice dripping with false modesty. "We are just so blessed. Ava is doing marvelously with the charity board, and Logan, well, Logan is a financial wizard. He is the son Charles never had." "And what about Melody?" Mrs. Gable asked innocently. "I heard a rumor she was in town." Vivian's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. "Oh, poor Melody." Vivian sighed, leaning in as if sharing a tragic secret. "We try to help her, of course, but some children just fail to launch. She is the only failure in the Dunn line. I am afraid. Mental instability. We pray for her, but we have to keep our distance for our own safety." I stood there in the dark, my fingernails digging into my palms. Mental instability. That was their narrative. That was how they explained away the daughter who refused to be a prop in their play. They didn't just cast me out. They gaslit the entire town into believing I was the broken one. The orchestra wound down, the lights dimmed, leaving only a single, bright spotlight focused on the podium. Charles Dunn stepped up to the microphone. Applause broke out. Polite, enthusiastic applause from people who had no idea they were clapping for a man who had forged his daughter's signature to pay for the wine they were drinking. Charles looked magnificent in his tuxedo. He raised his hands, silencing the room with the practiced ease of a cult leader. "Thank you," he boomed, his voice rich and warm. "Thank you all. 35 years. It seems like a lifetime, yet it has gone by in the blink of an eye. Vivian and I built this hotel with nothing but a dream and hard work." He paused for effect. "But tonight is not just about looking back. It is about looking forward. It is about legacy." I stepped out from behind the curtain. I moved silently along the back wall, the black silk of my dress blending with the shadows, but the movement caught the eye of a few guests at the rear tables. They turned, squinting, then they nudged their neighbors. A ripple of whispers began to spread from the back of the room, moving forward like a wave. Charles didn't notice. He was too busy selling the lie. "We are launching something special tonight," Charles announced, gesturing to the massive screen behind him. "The Dunn Elevation Fund, an exclusive opportunity for our closest friends to join us in the next chapter of the Opaline Empire." He clicked a remote. The screen lit up with a high-resolution image of the Opaline Summit Hotel, glowing at sunset. Underneath the photo, in bold gold letters, were the words, "Primary asset, 100% owned, debt-free." The lie was so big, so brazen, that I almost admired it. He wasn't just hiding the debt. He was claiming it didn't exist. He was selling shares in a building that belonged to Northbridge Vale. "This property," Charles said, turning to look at the image of the hotel, "is the bedrock of our family. It is unencumbered. It is pure equity, and we are offering 40% of this equity to you, our trusted partners, to fund our expansion into Europe." The crowd murmured in appreciation. I saw checkbooks being pulled out on the tables. I saw the greed in their eyes. A debt-free luxury hotel in this market? It was a gold mine. "We have structured this fund to provide safety and growth," Charles continued, his voice swelling with confidence. He was reaching the crescendo of his pitch. "We have secured the initial capital. We have the vision. And because we value family above all else, we are offering a guaranteed return on investment of 15% in the first year." 15%. That was the number. That was the hook. In a market paying 5%, 15 was impossible unless you were stealing from Peter to pay Paul. The guests gasped. Someone started to clap prematurely. Charles smiled, basking in the adoration. He opened his mouth to deliver the closing line, the call to action that would open the floodgates of money. "So I invite you all to—" I stood up. I didn't just stand. I rose from a table near the center aisle where I had quietly taken a seat moments before. The movement was sharp, deliberate. The whispers that had been rippling through the room suddenly coalesced into a collective intake of breath. I was a black scar in a room full of gold and pastels. I stood tall, my shoulders back, my chin lifted. The light from the stage caught the sharp planes of my face. Charles stopped mid-sentence. He blinked, looking out into the semi-darkness of the audience. He saw the black silhouette standing in the aisle. Vivian dropped her champagne glass. It hit the table, shattering, the sound cutting through the silence like a gunshot. Ava froze, her hand halfway to her mouth. Logan went rigid, his eyes locking onto me with the terrifying realization that I hadn't left the building. I didn't speak, not yet. I just stood there, staring directly at my father. The guests turned in their chairs. 500 heads swiveled to look at the woman who had interrupted the king. They looked from me to the stage and back again. They saw the resemblance. They saw the tension that was thick enough to choke on. Is that the daughter?" someone whispered loudly. "I thought she was crazy," another voice murmured. Charles gripped the podium. His knuckles were white. The charm was evaporating, replaced by a flash of panic that he tried desperately to hide. We seem to have a disruption," Charles stammered, forcing a tight smile. "Security, if you could please escort the—" I took one step into the aisle. The click of my heel on the parquet floor was audible in the silence. I didn't need a microphone. I had projected my voice in boardrooms filled with shouting men. I knew how to throw my voice so it hit the back wall. "You cannot sell what you do not own, Charles," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and devastatingly steady. The room erupted into hushed chaos. The investors looked at the screen, 100% owned, and then back at me. Charles's face turned a violent shade of purple. "Cut her, Mike! Get her out of here!" he screamed, forgetting that I wasn't holding a microphone. "I do not need a mic," I said, walking slowly down the center aisle toward the stage. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea, pulling their chairs back, terrified of the energy radiating off me. "And you do not need security. You need a lawyer." I stopped 10 feet from the stage. I looked up at him, then at Vivian, then at Ava. I raised my hand, holding a sleek black tablet. "Larkin," I said, my voice cutting through the rising murmur. "Change the slide." Charles looked confused. He looked toward the AV booth. "Do not touch anything. I am the owner of this." The screen behind him flickered. The beautiful image of the Sunset Hotel vanished. In its place, a stark, high-contrast document appeared. It was a deed of trust, and stamped across it in bold, red digital letters were the words, "Notice of default and seizure. Property of Northbridge Vale distressed assets." The room went dead silent. I looked at my father, whose jaw had practically unhinged. "Actually," I said, allowing the smallest, coldest smile to touch my lips, "as of 1 minute past midnight, I am the owner." And then, the real show began. I walked up the 3 wooden steps onto the stage. The sound of my heels on the hollow platform echoed like a gavel striking a sounding block. Charles stood frozen at the podium, his face a mask of disbelief that was rapidly crumbling into terror. He gripped the microphone stand so hard his knuckles were white, but he did not speak. He could not speak. The slide behind him, the notice of seizure, had sucked the oxygen out of his lungs. I reached out and gently, almost effortlessly, took the microphone from his hand. He let it go. He was in shock. I turned to face the room. 500 faces stared back at me. The silence was absolute, heavy with the weight of a party that had just turned into a funeral. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, my voice magnified by the speakers, filling every corner of the ballroom. "But I am legally obligated to pause this transaction. What you are being sold tonight is not an investment opportunity. It is a crime scene." "Cut the sound!" Charles finally found his voice, screaming toward the back of the room. "Cut the feed! She is lying!" But the sound did not cut. Larkin was manning the booth, and for the first time in his career, He was serving the truth instead of the duns. "Larkin, next slide," I commanded calmly. The screen behind me shifted. The seizure notice vanished, replaced by a dense, complex financial spreadsheet. It was zoomed in on the debt column. "This is the current balance sheet of the Opaline Summit," I explained. Using the laser pointer I had swiped from the podium, I circled a figure in red. "As you can see, the hotel is carrying debt obligations of $45 million. The bonds are held by my firm, Northbridge Vale. We acquired them 6 months ago. The liquidity ratio you were shown earlier? It was a fabrication." I looked down at the front row, where Mr. Henderson, the head of the local bank, was sitting. His face was gray. "Mr. Henderson," I said, addressing him directly, "you approved a bridge loan 3 months ago based on a personal guarantee from Melody Dunn. You believed I had rejoined the family trust." I signaled to the booth, "Next slide." The screen changed again. This time, it displayed the loan document. The signature at the bottom was blown up to the size of a billboard. It read, "Melody Dunn," written in a looping, elegant script. "That is not my signature," I stated. A gasp rippled through the room. "And it is not a random forgery," I continued. "We ran a forensic handwriting analysis against known samples. The slant, the pressure points, the loop on the Y. It is a perfect match for the person who sat next to me in 3rd grade penmanship class." I turned slowly to look at the VIP table. "Hello, Ava." Ava was shaking. She had dropped her fork. Her face was as pale as the tablecloth. She looked at the screen, then at me, her eyes wide with the horror of a child caught stealing from the jar, except the jar was worth $2 million and the punishment was prison. "That is a lie!" Vivian shrieked. Standing up, she knocked her chair over. "How dare you accuse your sister? You are jealous. You have always been jealous." "Jealousy does not leave a paper trail, Mother," I replied. "Fraud does." I turned back to the audience. The investors were no longer looking at the stage with admiration. They were pulling out their phones. I saw text messages being fired off. I saw Mr. Henderson dialing a number, presumably his legal department. The illusion of the Dunn Empire was dissolving in real time. "But the forgery is just the mechanism," I said, my voice hardening. "The motive is what matters. Why would a family risk federal prison to secure a loan?" "Because they needed to cover the exit strategy." I looked at Logan Pierce. He was sitting very still. He hadn't moved since I walked onto the stage. He knew what was coming. He was staring at his hands, perhaps calculating the distance to the nearest exit. "Larkin," I said, "play the audio." The speakers crackled for a split second, and then Logan's voice filled the room. It was crystal clear, recorded in high definition from the hallway less than an hour ago. "Listen, the ship is taking on water faster than I thought. The old man is delusional. He thinks this gala is going to save him. But the books are cooked, burnt to a crisp. I need my share out before the feds realize the Dunn Elevation Fund is just a fancy way of saying Ponzi scheme. Just do it." The recording ended. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't shocked anymore. It was dangerous. Ava turned to her husband. Her movement was slow, mechanical. She looked at him as if he were a stranger she had just met in a dark alley. "Logan?" she whispered. Her voice was picked up by the sensitive microphones I had planted in the floral centerpiece. "What is that? What did you say?" Logan didn't answer. He couldn't look at her. "Ponzi scheme?" a man in the 3rd row shouted, standing up. "I gave you a check for $50,000 last week." "And I put in $100,000, another woman yelled. Panic broke out. It wasn't a stampede, but it was the social equivalent. Chairs were pushed back. People were standing, shouting at Charles, demanding answers. The veneer of civility was gone. The wealthy do not like being robbed, but they hate being humiliated even more. Charles looked around wildly. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "Stop this," he hissed at me, his eyes manic. "You are ruining us. You are destroying the family. This is a misunderstanding. Tell them it is a misunderstanding." I pulled my arm away from his grip with a sharp jerk. I smoothed the silk of my dress where he had touched me. "It is not a misunderstanding, Charles," I said into the microphone. "It is evidence." "This is a family matter," Charles screamed, his voice cracking, projecting his desperation to the entire room. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. "Please, everyone, calm down. This is just a domestic dispute. My daughter is upset. We will settle this privately. There is no need for alarm." He looked at me, pleading now. "Melody, please, we can talk about this. In the back, just you and me. We are family." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had thrown me out into the rain. I looked at the man who had called me a stain. I looked at the man who had tried to sell a building he didn't own to the people he called friends. "Family?" I asked. I let the word hang there. "You lost the right to use that word when you turned my name into a crime." I stepped back, isolating him in the spotlight. He looked small. He looked old. "And as for settling this privately," I said, my voice ringing out like a judgment, "I am afraid that is no longer an option." I pointed toward the double doors at the back of the ballroom. "Because if this is just a private family matter, Charles," I asked, "then why is the Securities and Exchange Commission standing at the door?" On cue, the house lights flooded on. The warm, intimate amber glow of the gala vanished, replaced by the harsh, unflinching brightness of the cleaning lights. The double doors swung open with a heavy thud. 6 people walked in. They were not wearing tuxedos. They were wearing navy blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. Lead agents, federal investigators. The crowd parted instantly, creating a wide corridor down the center of the room. The silence returned, but this time it was the silence of judgment. The lead agent, a tall woman with a face like carved stone, walked straight toward the stage. She did not look at the guests. She did not look at the champagne. She looked only at Charles Dunn. I stepped to the side, giving them a clear path. Charles stood alone at the podium. He looked at the approaching agents. Then he looked at me. His eyes were filled with a mixture of hatred and confusion. He still didn't understand. He still thought he could talk his way out of it. But you cannot talk your way out of math, and you cannot charm your way out of a federal indictment. I lowered the microphone. My part of the performance was over. The stage now belonged to the law. The lead federal agent, a woman whose badge identified her as Special Agent Miller, did not run up the stairs. She walked with the heavy, deliberate pace of someone who knew the outcome was already written in stone. She stopped 3 feet from the podium, ignoring my father's outstretched hand. "Charles Dunn," she said, her voice carrying to the back of the silent ballroom without the need for a microphone. "I have a warrant for your arrest." My father blinked. It was a slow, confused motion, like a man waking up from a dream to find himself in a burning house. He looked at the agent, then he looked at the guests who were now standing in stunned silence, their champagne glasses forgotten on the tables. "This is ridiculous," Charles sputtered, his laugh sounding brittle and manic. "I am hosting a gala. These are my friends. You cannot just walk in here and—" "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and bank fraud." Agent Miller interrupted, her tone flat and professional. She reached for her belt. The metallic clink of the handcuffs being unholstered was the loudest sound in the room. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "No," Charles said, stepping back. He looked at the crowd, his eyes wide and desperate. Tell them this is a mistake. Henderson, Judge Reynolds, you know me? I am Charles Dunn." Nobody moved. Judge Reynolds, who was sitting at table 4, deliberately picked up his napkin and wiped his mouth, looking away. The social shield my father had spent 35 years constructing had evaporated in 30 seconds. The agent did not ask a second time. She stepped forward, grabbed Charles's wrist with practiced efficiency, and spun him around. The sound of the ratchets locking, click, 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 echoed through the high-ceilinged room. It was a sound that signified the end of an era. The king of Silver Rock was in chains. "Vivian Dunn," another agent announced, moving toward the VIP table. My mother was standing by her overturned chair. She had drawn herself up to her full height, clutching her diamond necklace as if it were a talisman that could ward off the law. "Do not touch me," she hissed at the agent approaching her. "I am not involved in this. This is my husband's business. I am just a wife. I am a patron of the arts. We have your signature on the falsified zoning permits and the shell company incorporation papers. Mrs. Dunn," the agent said calmly, "you are under arrest for aiding and abetting, and for forgery." "Forgery?" Vivian shrieked, her voice cracking. "I never forged anything. It was her." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She is the liar. She is the one trying to ruin us." The agent ignored her outburst. Taking her arm firmly, Vivian struggled, her heels scraping against the parquet floor, her dignity shattering with every frantic movement. When the cuffs went on her, she let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream. It was a gasp of pure indignation, the sound of a woman who had never been told no in her entire life. Then there was Logan. My brother-in-law had stood up. He was smoothing his tuxedo jacket, a tight, artificial smile plastered on his face. He looked at the agents moving toward the table, then he looked at me. He gave me a small nod, a conspiratorial look that said I held up my end of the bargain. "Now get them off me." He turned to the agent approaching him. "Officers, good evening. I am Logan Pierce. I believe you have my file. I am the cooperating witness. If you need me to come down to the station to give a formal statement, I can drive myself. My car is out back." He took a step toward the exit, confident in his immunity. "Mr. Pierce," the agent said, stepping into his path, "you are not going anywhere." Logan's smile faltered. "Excuse me? I have a deal. Check with your supervisor. I provided the evidence." "We received the evidence," the agent confirmed. "And we also received a digital recording taken 40 minutes ago where you admitted to actively directing the wire transfers to an offshore account in the Seychelles to facilitate money laundering. Your immunity deal was contingent on you being a passive observer. Mr. Pierce, not the architect." Logan froze. His face went gray. He spun around to look at me, his eyes bulging with betrayal. "You," he snarled. "You recorded me? You promised you would not sue me." "I am not suing you, Logan," I said from the stage, my voice calm and carrying over the commotion. "I am just watching the government arrest you. There is a difference." "You bitch!" Logan lunged toward the stage. But two agents were on him instantly. They slammed him against the wall, his face pressed into the silk wallpaper. He was not treated with the same delicate caution as Charles. He was treated like the flight risk he was. And then there was Ava. My sister was the only one left standing at the table. She looked at her father in handcuffs. She looked at her mother being restrained. She looked at her husband being patted down against the wall. She looked at the empty chairs where her friends had been sitting. She did not scream. She did not fight. Her legs simply gave out. Ava collapsed. It wasn't a faint. It was a surrender. She sank to the floor in a pile of red silk, her wide skirt billowing out around her like a pool of blood. She sat there on the floor of the ballroom, looking small and broken, staring at her hands. The golden child had been stripped of her gold. She was just a girl in a dress she could no longer afford, sitting in the wreckage of a life that had never really been hers. The room was painfully quiet now, save for the low murmur of the agents reading the Miranda rights. I walked down the steps of the stage. As I moved down the center aisle, the guests did not pull away from me in fear anymore. They looked at me with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Mr. Henderson, the banker who had almost lost his career tonight, stepped out of the crowd. He looked shaken, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Ms. Dunn," he said, his voice trembling. "Melody, my God." He looked at the stage where the seizure notice was still projected on the screen. "I had the transfer papers in my jacket pocket," Henderson confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "I was going to sign the release for the remaining funds tonight, if you hadn't walked in, if you hadn't stopped him." "The bank would have collapsed," I finished for him. "You saved us," a woman behind him said. She was clutching her purse to her chest. I was about to write a check for $100,000. He was so convincing. You saved us from being wiped out. Thank you, another voice murmured. She is the only honest one in the bunch, someone else whispered. I nodded to them, acknowledging their words, but I did not stop. I had one last transaction to complete. I walked toward the exit where the agents were lining up my family for transport. They were creating a perimeter, holding back the press photographers who had somehow managed to sneak in the back doors, probably tipped off by the sirens. Charles was the first in line. When he saw me approaching, he stopped. The agent holding his arm tried to nudge him forward, but Charles dug his heels in. He stared at me. His face was no longer purple with rage. It was pale, drawn, and etched with a hatred so deep it looked like madness. Are you happy? Charles rasped. His voice was a husk of the baritone that had commanded this room 10 minutes ago. You destroyed it all. 35 years. You burned it to the ground. I did not light the match. Charles, I said, standing toe-to-toe with him, looking him in the eye. I just refuse to let you use me as firewood anymore. You are nothing, he spat. You are still nothing. You will never be a dun. You are right, I said. I am not a dun. I am the owner of the Opaline Summit, and you are a trespasser. The agent pulled him forward. Charles stumbled, his head bowing in defeat. Vivian was next. Her hair was disheveled, her mascara running. She looked wild, stripped of her composure. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed into slits. You ungrateful wretch, she screamed, struggling against the cuffs. After everything we gave you life. You are not my daughter. Do you hear me? You are not my daughter. The words echoed off the walls. The guests flinched. It was the ultimate rejection. Screamed in front of 500 witnesses. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I had heard those words before, in a dark hallway, whispered through a locked door. Hearing them now, under the bright lights, they had no power. They were just noise. I leaned in close, so close I could smell the expensive champagne on her breath. I know, Mother, I said softly. You said that 10 years ago when you threw me out. I finally believed you. Vivian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The truth silenced her. She was dragged past me, her heels clicking in a regular rhythm on the floor. Logan didn't even look at me as he was marched out. He was staring at the floor, muttering to himself, probably already trying to calculate a new plea deal in his head, but there were no deals left. I turned to look at Ava. She was still sitting on the floor. An agent was gently trying to help her stand up. She wasn't under arrest, not yet. Anyway, her name wasn't on the incorporation papers, only the forged signature, which made her a victim of her parents' coercion in the eyes of the law, at least for tonight. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, rimmed with tears. Melody, she whimpered. It was the voice of a little sister, small and scared. What do I do? They are taking them away. What do I do? I looked down at her. Part of me, the part that shared blood with her, wanted to reach out. But then I remembered the slap. I remembered the live stream. I remembered the $500 thrown at my face. You stand up, I said coldly, and you walk out, just like I did. I turned my back on her. The agents pushed the doors open. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning storms outside, blinding white light flooding into the ballroom. The paparazzi were waiting. My family was marched out into the glare. Charles, head down. Vivian, weeping. Logan, defeated. They were paraded past the very people they had tried to swindle. The guests watched them go, their faces a mixture of pity and disgust. The Dunn dynasty ended not with a bang, but with the click-clack of handcuffs and the flash of cameras capturing their shame for the morning papers. I stood in the center of the ballroom, alone in the space they had vacated. The music had stopped. The applause had died. A waiter, looking terrified, approached me holding a silver tray with a single glass of champagne. Ms. Dunn? He asked hesitantly. Or is it Ms. Vane? I looked at the glass. I looked at the empty stage. I looked at the seizure notice still glowing on the screen behind me. "It is Ms. Dunn," I said, taking the glass. "It has always been Ms. Dunn." I didn't drink it. I placed it on the table where my mother had been sitting. The room was mine. The hotel was mine. The night was mine. But as the door swung shut, cutting off the view of the flashing lights outside, I didn't feel joy. I felt the clean, cold emptiness of a room that had finally been swept of all its dust. I turned to Larkin, who was standing by the AV booth, looking like he had survived a war. "Clear the room, Arthur," I said quietly. "The party is over." The silence that followed the raid was heavier than the noise of the arrest. The ballroom, which had been vibrating with the energy of 500 wealthy egos just 30 minutes ago, was now a cavern of discarded napkins and overturned chairs. The federal agents had swept the main targets out the back door, leaving a vacuum in their wake. The guests had fled, scattering like roaches when the kitchen light is turned on, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of the name Dunn. I stood near the edge of the stage, watching the cleaning crew nervously emerge from the shadows. They moved tentatively, unsure if they were still being paid, unsure if the hotel was even still open. "Keep working," I told them, my voice cutting through the quiet. "You will all be paid overtime for tonight, double time." They nodded, relieved, and began the task of sweeping up the shattered glass of my mother's champagne flute. In the center of the room, amidst the wreckage of the evening, one figure remained: Ava. She was still sitting on the floor, her crimson dress pooling around her like a wilting rose. She had stopped crying. Or perhaps she had simply run out of tears. She was staring at a spot on the carpet, her face a mask of smudged mascara and absolute shock. The agents had left her behind. She was not the architect, merely the beneficiary, but in some ways, being left behind was cruel in its own right. She was the debris left after the storm. I walked down the steps of the stage, the heels of my black shoes clicking a steady, ominous rhythm on the parquet floor. I stopped 3 feet away from her. She heard me approach. She looked up. Her eyes, usually so full of mockery and confidence, were hollow. "You did this," Ava whispered. Her voice was raw, scratching its way out of her throat. "Are you happy now? You destroyed everything. Mom, Dad, Logan, the reputation. You burned it all down." I looked down at her, feeling a strange absence of emotion. I expected to feel triumph. I expected to feel the rush of victory. But all I felt was the clinical satisfaction of a surgeon who had successfully removed a gangrenous limb. "I did not destroy anything, Ava," I said calm. "The truth destroyed it. The lies were the only thing holding the roof up. I just kicked out the rotten pillars." "They are your parents!" she screamed, a sudden burst of energy returning to her. She tried to stand up but stumbled on her heavy skirts, catching herself on a chair. "They raised you, and you handed them over to the feds like they were strangers." "They treated me like a stranger for 10 years, I replied. "And tonight, they treated the law like a suggestion. Do not confuse consequences with malice." Ava sobbed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture so childish it was almost jarring to see on a 30-year-old woman. "I didn't know," she whimpered. "I didn't know it was illegal. Dad just told me to sign the papers. He said it was to help the family. He said if I didn't sign, we would lose the summer house. I just wanted to help." "You signed a loan application worth $2 million without reading it," I stated. "You signed zoning permits for land we did not own. Ignorance is not a defense, Ava. It is negligence." "I trusted them," she cried. "I trusted Logan. He told me he was handling the investments. He told me we were rich." "Logan was laundering money before he even proposed to you," I said. "He married you because you were the perfect cover, pretty, distracted, and completely uninterested in looking at a bank statement." Ava flinched as if I had slapped her. The reality of her marriage, the realization that she had been a pawn in her husband's game, was finally sinking in. I reached into the small clutch bag I had carried onto the stage. I pulled out a thick white envelope. It was heavy, filled with legal documents that Maya had drafted while the raid was happening. I extended the envelope toward her. "What is this?" Ava asked, eyeing it warily. "A lifeline," I said, "or a sentence, depending on how you look at it." Ava hesitated, then reached out and took the envelope. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She tore it open and pulled out the papers. "It is a plea agreement," I explained as she stared blankly at the legal jargon. "I spoke with the federal prosecutor before I came downstairs. I told him that the Northbridge Vale legal team would handle the civil restitution for the investors. In exchange, I asked for leniency for you." Ava looked up, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time. "Leniency? So, I am free? I do not have to go to jail?" "You are not going to prison for the fraud," I said. "Provided you testify against Charles and Logan, you have to tell them everything you know about the signatures and the dates." "I will," Ava said quickly, nodding frantically. "I will tell them anything. I just want to go home. I want to go back to the penthouse." "Read the second page, Ava," I said cold. She flipped the page. Her eyes scanned the text, her brow furrowed. Then, her mouth dropped open. What is this?" she stammered. "Asset restitution clerk? Minimum wage? 50 hours a week?" "The investors lost millions tonight," I said. "My firm is setting up a restitution fund to pay them back over time. That fund needs staff. It needs people to file the claims, answer the angry phone calls, and process the paperwork." I took a step closer. "That is your job, Ava, for the next 5 years." "You cannot be serious," Ava gasped. "You want me to be a secretary? For 5 years? Answering phones for the people Dad ripped off?" "Not a secretary," I corrected. "A clerk, and you will be paid the state minimum wage, $15 an hour, no trust fund access, no dividends. You live on what you earn." "This is humiliating," Ava shrieked, throwing the papers onto the table. "You are doing this to humiliate me. You want to see me suffer. I am Ava Dunn. I do not file paperwork." "You are Ava Dunn," I repeated. "And right now, that name is worth less than the dirt on your shoes. You have 2 choices. Ava, option A is you walk out that door, you get indicted as a co-conspirator, and you face 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Option B is you take the job, you work, you sweat, you listen to the voices of the people our family hurt. You learn what it actually feels like to earn $1 instead of having it handed to you." Ava stared at me with pure hatred. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the champagne glass at me, but she knew, deep down, under the layers of entitlement, she knew I was the only person standing between her and a concrete cell. "Why?" she whispered. "Why not just let me go?" "Because you need to learn," I said. "You threw money at my face tonight because you thought it was trash. You thought $500 was nothing. I want you to work until you understand exactly how many hours of your life $500 represents." I turned away from her, signaling that the negotiation was over. "You have until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to report to the Northbridge Vale temporary office," I said over my shoulder. "Do not be late. We dock pay for tardiness." I walked toward the spot near the lobby entrance where the confrontation had happened earlier. The money was still there. The 5 crisp $100 bills that Logan had thrown at me were scattered on the marble floor. In the chaos of the raid, no one had touched them. They lay there like green leaves on a grave. I bent down. I picked them up, one by one. I smoothed out the bill I had crushed with my heel. Benjamin Franklin looked back at me, wrinkled but valuable. I turned to the young waiter who was collecting glasses near the pillar. He was the same one who had looked at me with terror when I first walked in. He looked tired. His shoes were worn out. "Excuse me," I said. He jumped, nearly dropping his tray. "Yes, Miss Dunn?" I held out the $500. "Take this," I said. He looked at the money, then at me. I cannot accept that, ma'am. It is too much." "It is not a tip," I said, pressing the bills into his hand. "Split it with the cleaning crew and the kitchen staff who are closing up tonight. Tell them it is an apology for the mess." He looked down at the cash, more than he probably made in a week, and nodded, his eyes wide. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do not thank me, I said, glancing back at Ava, who was slowly picking up the plea deal documents from the table. Just spend it on something real. I walked out of the ballroom. I crossed the lobby, passing the spot where the banner celebrating the 35th anniversary still hung. I paused for a second, looking at the smiling faces of my parents printed on the silk. It felt like looking at strangers. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the cool night air. The sirens had faded into the distance, the flashing lights were gone, the driveway was empty, save for a single black sedan waiting for me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Maya. It is done, I said as I slid into the back seat of the car. Did she take the deal? Maya asked. She will, I said, watching the hotel recede in the rearview mirror. She is a survivor. Survivors always take the deal. And the press? Maya asked. They are going to want a statement. The story is already breaking. Heiress returns to topple empire. They want the hero arc, Melody. I leaned my head back against the leather seat and closed my eyes. Tell them nothing, I said. Tell them the new management has no comment. They do not need a hero, Maya, and they do not need a sequel. Justice happened tonight. That is the only story that matters. I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the dark silhouette of the mountains. I touched my cheek one last time. It didn't hurt anymore. The debt was paid. The ledger was balanced. And for the first time in 10 years, I was truly, completely free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Melody Dunn as much as I enjoyed writing it for you. Where are you tuning in from right now? Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? I would love to hear your thoughts on Melody's decision in the comments below. Did Ava deserve a harsher punishment, or was the job the perfect revenge? Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video if you enjoyed the drama, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who love a good payback. See you in the next story.